The atmosphere in my in-laws' house was heavy, and not just because of the summer heat. I could feel it in my chest, the weight of expectations. My mother-in-law, Pratima, had been acting particularly overbearing that day. I knew what was coming as soon as we walked into the living room. Her eyes flickered over me, and I could almost see the wheels turning in her head. She had this knack for making even the simplest gathering feel like an interrogation. "Rajiv, you're here," she said with a forced enthusiasm that didn't match the tone of her voice. "Shreya, why don't you ask your husband to contribute a little more this time?" I froze, but only for a second. I wasn't sure whether it was the tone or the words themselves, but it hit me like a punch in the gut. I had been working long hours the last few weeks. My company was going through some challenging times, and every moment of peace felt hard to come by. But Pratima's demands? They were always there, lurking in the background, ready to remind me of what I owed her. "What exactly do you need this time?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. I didn't want to start another argument, not at my father-in-law's birthday party. "Oh, nothing much," she said, dismissing me with a wave. "Just a small contribution for our family vacation next month. We're planning something extravagant this time, maybe a cruise or even Europe, something truly luxurious. We need a little help from you, of course." I glanced at Shreya, hoping for some sign of support, but she was busy talking to her sister, completely avoiding the conversation. It was as if she didn't even hear her mother's request. Or maybe she didn't want to hear it. I could feel my patience beginning to fray. Pratima continued, "We're all so grateful for what you've done for the family, but we could really use a little extra, just to make it perfect. It's been such a stressful time lately, and a vacation would be the perfect way to unwind." She wasn't even trying to hide her manipulation. It was like she had become so accustomed to using my wealth for her own comfort that she no longer bothered with pretense. "Rajiv, don't you think it's time you helped out a little more?" Shreya's voice cut through the tension. She was standing next to me now, a tight smile on her face, but I could see the discomfort in her eyes. "You always say we should support family. This is just part of it." I swallowed the bitter words that rose in my throat. It wasn't just the money. It was the constant undermining, the subtle ways they all treated me like I existed solely to serve their needs. I had put in years of work, building my business from the ground up. I didn't come from money, and I had fought tooth and nail for everything I had. But here I was, being treated as if my financial success was owed to them, not my own effort. "Of course, I'll contribute," I said through clenched teeth, trying to keep the peace. "Just tell me how much you need." Pratima's face lit up, but not in the way you'd expect. It wasn't gratitude. It was triumph. She had won again. My contribution, however much it was, would never be enough. She always wanted more, and I was too weak to say no. "I'll let you know the details later. Just make sure you're not too busy this time. We really need your help." She turned away, already moving on to other topics. But I was stuck, frozen in place. The feeling of being taken for granted, of being nothing more than a wallet with legs, was suffocating. And yet I said nothing. I could already feel the resentment building. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Pratima's constant chatter about her plans for the vacation, the new car she wanted to buy, the remodeling she had in mind for the house. All of it felt like a hammer on my chest. But what bothered me most wasn't her constant requests for money. It was the way she made me feel small, inadequate. Every comment, every suggestion she made, was coated with a thin layer of praise but laden with a deeper implication. That I wasn't doing enough, that no matter what I did, I could never meet her expectations. When we got home that night, I was exhausted. Not just from the long hours at work, but from the emotional toll of dealing with my in-laws. I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside me was breaking. Shreya, who had been quiet for most of the evening, didn't say a word when we got to our apartment. She busied herself with sorting through some papers while I stood by the door, trying to gather my thoughts. "Shreya," I said, my voice low but firm, "we need to talk." She looked up, startled, as if she had forgotten I was there. "What about?" "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep giving them money like I'm some kind of ATM. There's never enough and they don't appreciate it. They don't appreciate me. And you don't seem to care that they treat me like this." Her eyes widened, and I could see the hesitation in her expression. She didn't know how to respond. After a long pause, she said, "I don't know what you want me to say. My mother is just difficult. But she's family, Rajiv. We have to help." "No, Shreya," I said, taking a deep breath. "I've done enough. More than enough. It's not just about the money anymore. It's about respect. They treat me like I'm nothing more than a bank. And you stand by and let it happen." Her face reddened, and she turned away, clearly uncomfortable. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know you felt this way. I've been telling you this for months," I replied, my voice a little sharper than I intended. "But it's always the same. You side with them every single time." I watched as she closed her eyes, perhaps in frustration, perhaps in regret. "I just don't know what you want me to do, Rajiv. I'm caught in the middle." I didn't know what to say. I had always been the one to compromise to keep the peace. But now something had snapped. I couldn't keep living this way, and I certainly couldn't keep sacrificing my dignity for people who only saw me as a means to an end. "I want you to stand with me, Shreya," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to stand with me for once." She didn't respond. The silence between us felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced. And in that silence, I realized just how deep the divide between us had grown. The next few weeks passed in a haze. Pratima's demands never stopped. She was always asking for more, always pushing the boundaries. And Shreya, despite her occasional attempts to mediate, never once stood up for me. It became clear that nothing would change. The pattern was set. They would take and I would give. I could feel myself losing pieces of who I was, pieces that I couldn't get back. But what bothered me more than anything wasn't the requests. It was the realization that I had allowed this to happen. I had allowed them to walk all over me, to treat me as nothing more than a source of income. I had allowed my marriage, my peace of mind, to be held hostage by their greed. And now I had to figure out what to do about it. The days bled into one another, each one feeling heavier than the last. I woke up each morning with a pit in my stomach, dreading the inevitable call or message from my in-laws, asking for more. It had become a constant cycle, one that I couldn't escape. Every time I thought I could catch my breath, there was another demand, another request for money, or some extravagant family investment that they expected me to foot the bill for. They didn't care about the toll it was taking on me. They never had. Shreya, meanwhile, had begun to distance herself from the conversations. It wasn't that she didn't understand, I think she did, but it was easier for her to avoid confrontation. She'd sit there, her eyes cast downward, as her mother went on about how much the family deserved from me. And I let it happen, mostly because I was too tired to fight. I had stopped expecting her to stand by me. What good would it do? Her loyalty had always been split, and I had learned to accept it, even though it hurt. The tension between us started to grow. I could feel it in the little things. Shreya not being able to look me in the eye when we spoke, her long silences, the way her smile no longer reached her eyes when she greeted me. I tried talking to her, tried to make her understand how exhausted I was, how much it was tearing me apart, but she always deflected, always found a way to justify it. "It's family, Rajiv. It's what we do." I had heard that line 1,000 times, and every time I came home from the office after another exhausting day of meetings and calls, hoping for some peace. But as soon as I walked through the door, I saw Pratima sitting on the couch, her presence as imposing as ever. She looked up, a smug smile tugging at her lips. "Ah, Ajiv, you're just in time," she said, her voice too sweet, too calculated. "We were just discussing the details of the family trip, and it seems like we might need a little more from you." I didn't even bother to ask what a little more meant. I had already learned that it was never just a little more. It was always more than I could afford to give, emotionally, financially, or otherwise. "I've already contributed," I said, my voice tight. "I don't know why you keep asking for more." "Oh, Rajiv, you know how it is," she replied, her tone dripping with fake sympathy. The family is counting on you. You're the only one who can help us out. The trip isn't going to pay for itself after all. And we all need a little something extra. Don't we? Her words felt like daggers, each one twisting deeper into my already frayed nerves. I tried to stay calm, tried to keep my emotions in check, but it was getting harder with every passing day. This time, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I wasn't going to be the punching bag anymore. Enough, Pratima, I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. I'm done. I've given you enough and I can't keep doing this. I won't. Her expression faltered for a moment, but it quickly morphed into something colder, more calculating. What are you talking about? This is family. You're part of this family, and you need to step up. I've stepped up more times than I can count, I said, my fists clenching. I've worked myself to the bone to make sure you all live comfortably. But it's never enough, is it? No matter how much I give, it's never enough. You don't see me as a person. You see me as a bank, and I'm done with it. Her face twisted with indignation. You ungrateful little. Enough? I snapped, cutting her off before she could finish. I'm not doing this anymore. I can't. I won't. I turned to Shreya, who had been standing quietly by the door, watching the scene unfold. I could see the discomfort on her face, but there was no sign of support. She didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood there, as if waiting for me to back down. I looked at her, hoping for something, anything that would make me feel like I wasn't alone in this. But there was nothing. No comforting words, no reassurance, just silence. I've been telling you for months, Shreya, I said, my voice quieter now, almost resigned. I can't keep doing this, but you don't seem to care. She finally spoke, but her words were hollow, almost mechanical. I don't know what you want me to say, Rajiv. I'm caught in the middle. I can't make everyone happy. You're not making me happy, I said, the hurt in my voice unmistakable. You're not even trying. You're letting them walk all over me, and you don't even care. She took a step back, and for a moment, I thought she was going to leave. Instead, she said, I don't know what you expect me to do. They're my family, Rajiv. I can't just turn my back on them. I'm your family, too, Shreya, I said, the words coming out raw, the frustration and sadness clear in my voice. But you've turned your back on me, and that hurts more than anything. The silence between us stretched for what felt like an eternity. I wanted to shake her, to make her understand, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. She had made her choice and I had made mine. Without another word, I walked out of the room, needing space to clear my head. I had had enough. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep sacrificing my happiness, my dignity, for people who only saw me as a source of money. It was time to take control of my life, to make a decision that would finally break the cycle. I spent the rest of the evening alone in my study, pacing back and forth as I thought about what to do. I had always tried to be the good son-in-law, the good husband, but it had never been enough. No matter how much I gave, it was never enough. And now, my marriage was on the brink, torn apart by the greed of my in-laws and my own inability to set boundaries. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go on like this. I had to make a choice, and I wasn't going to let them destroy me anymore. The next morning, I met with an old friend for coffee. He was one of the few people who knew the full extent of what I had been going through. He listened patiently as I vented, as I laid out everything that had been weighing on my shoulders. Man, you've got to stop letting them control you, he said, his voice calm but firm. You've got to take back your life. You've worked hard for what you've got, and you deserve respect, not just from them, but from your wife, too. I nodded, feeling a surge of clarity wash over me. Maybe it was time to stop being the guy who always gives in. Maybe it was time to make a change, to take a stand. But how? That was the question. I had no answers, but I knew one thing. Something had to change. The days after my conversation with Shreya were the hardest I'd experienced in a long time. Every time I tried to focus on work or distract myself with something else, my mind kept drifting back to the conversation we'd had. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trapped in a cycle, one I couldn't escape from. The more I tried to break free, the tighter the grip of my in-laws, and to a lesser extent Shreya, seemed to become. It wasn't just the constant financial demands anymore. That was bad enough. What hurt the most was the realization that I had spent years trying to make everyone happy. Shreya, my in-laws, the people at work, at the expense of my own happiness. Every day felt like I was living someone else's life. A life where my worth was measured only in how much I could provide for everyone else, but never in the things that mattered: respect, kindness, understanding. I needed a plan. I couldn't keep going on like this, letting Pratima's constant requests and Shreya's indifference chip away at me. It wasn't just about standing up for myself anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. I had always prided myself on being the one who took care of things, the one who people could rely on. But now I had to learn how to rely on myself, how to say no, how to put my foot down. For once, I needed to be selfish. And for once, I needed to make a choice that was for me. The first step, I decided, was to stop pretending everything was fine. I couldn't keep appeasing them, especially not when I knew it would never be enough. They had taken too much from me, and it was time to stop giving. I had to stop fearing their disapproval, stop fearing what would happen if I said no. That night, when Shreya came home, I knew it was time to talk again. I had been avoiding it for days, not wanting to push her further away, but I couldn't keep avoiding the truth. If I didn't make her understand now, it would be too late. She walked in, looking exhausted as usual, but there was something different about her today. A faint smile, like she was hoping things would get better, but unsure of how to make it happen. It hurt to see her like this. She was my wife, but it felt like we were strangers at this point. "Rajiv, can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft. I could tell she wanted to fix things, or at least make it seem like everything was fine. But it was too late for that now. I didn't even wait for her to sit down. I turned to face her and said, "We need to have an honest conversation about everything." Her eyes flickered, and she sat down at the table, folding her arms across her chest as if preparing for the worst. "What do you mean?" "I mean about your mother, about your family, about us," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Shreya, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not." She blinked, clearly caught off guard. Frustration rising. "What's not okay?" But I held it back. I had to stay in control. I couldn't let her deflect this time. "Your mother, she keeps asking for more money, more things, and I keep giving it to her. And you're not even trying to stop it. You're not standing by me. Every time I say something, you make excuses for her. It's like I don't even exist anymore, except as a source of money." Shreya looked away, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. She had always been torn between me and her family, and I could see that this was no different. "Rajiv, you know she's just asking because she thinks you can afford it. You're the one with the money, and she doesn't know how to ask anyone else. It's not like she doesn't appreciate it. It's just what?" I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. "It's not about money, Shreya. It's about respect. She treats me like I'm her personal ATM, and you let her. You don't even try to defend me." She opened her mouth to respond but closed it again, shaking her head. "I don't know what you want me to do, Rajiv. I've tried, but you're making this harder than it has to be. You don't understand. I don't want to choose between you and my family. I can't. I won't." The words stung more than I expected. It wasn't that I hadn't heard them before. It was that I thought things were different now. I thought she would finally stand up for me, that she would see how much this was hurting me. But instead, she was still trapped in the same cycle, still clinging to the idea that family was everything, even at the expense of her own marriage. "I've been trying to make everyone happy, Shreya," I said, my voice softer now. "But I can't keep sacrificing my dignity, my happiness, for people who only see me as a way to get what they want. And you keep choosing them over me." Her face reddened, and for the first time in days, she looked like she was really hearing me. "I'm not choosing them over you," she said, her voice shaking. "I just don't know how to make it stop. I don't know how to fix this." I leaned forward, my gaze steady. The only way to fix this is for you to stand up for me, Shreya. For you to choose me, not them. I need you to make a choice. Are you with me? Or are you going to keep letting them use us? There was a long pause, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to say something, but she didn't know what. And for the first time in our marriage, I felt like we were on different sides. I was no longer the man who would do anything to keep the peace. I was the man who was finally demanding something in return. I don't know what to do, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I feel torn, Rajiv. I don't want to lose you, but I don't want to lose them either. I didn't know how to respond to that. I had given everything to make this work, to build a life with her. But now, I was starting to wonder if that was enough. If she wasn't willing to fight for us, to choose me over her family, then where did that leave us? I stood up, pushing the chair back with a force I hadn't intended. I can't keep doing this, Shreya, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I can't keep pretending everything's okay when it's not. I won't keep sacrificing my peace for people who don't respect me. I need you to make a choice, but right now, I can't keep waiting. With that, I walked out of the room, leaving her sitting there, alone with her thoughts. The weight of the conversation hung heavy in the air, but I didn't know if anything had truly changed. I didn't know if Shreya would ever understand, or if she was too far gone, too caught in the web of her family's expectations. But one thing was clear. I couldn't keep living this way. Something had to change. And if Shreya couldn't be the one to make that change, then maybe it was up to me to make the hardest decision of all. The days that followed were a blur of tension and uncertainty. The conversation with Shreya left me emotionally drained, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my chest. We were at a crossroads, and neither of us seemed willing to take the first step. It felt like the gap between us was widening with each passing day, each new request from her family that I had to deny. Every time the phone rang, my stomach twisted in knots, dreading who might be on the other end, asking for more, expecting more, giving nothing in return. I tried to focus on work, tried to distract myself with anything that could take my mind off the situation at home, but it was hard. How could I focus on anything when my own life was unraveling around me? The constant calls from Pratima, the passive-aggressive comments about how ungrateful I was, the way Shreya barely spoke to me anymore. It was all too much. It was as if they had become so accustomed to using me, to taking from me without giving anything back, that they no longer saw me as a person, just a resource to exploit. One evening, after yet another tense dinner, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I needed space. I needed to think. The weight of it all, the lies, the expectations, the resentment was suffocating. I wandered through the streets, my thoughts a jumbled mess. How had it come to this? How had the woman I married, the woman I thought I knew, turned into someone who would stand by and watch her family bleed me dry? I couldn't stay in this marriage any longer. Not like this. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect, about dignity. It was about standing up for myself and refusing to be treated like a doormat. I had tried for years to make things work, to be the perfect son-in-law, the perfect husband. But all my efforts had been in vain. Nothing I did was ever good enough. And now, after everything I had given, I was left with nothing but an empty marriage and an even emptier future. I knew what I had to do. I had to make a choice, and it wasn't going to be an easy one. I couldn't keep walking on eggshells, hoping that things would get better. The only way out of this toxic cycle was to take control of my life again. But how? How could I break free from a situation that felt like quicksand, pulling me deeper with every step? When I returned home that night, I found Shreya sitting in the living room, her eyes glued to her phone. She didn't even look up when I walked in, as if we were strangers in the same house. The silence between us was deafening, and for a moment, I thought about just walking away, leaving without a word. But I couldn't. I had to say something. I had to make her understand, even if it meant saying things I knew would hurt her. I can't keep doing this, Shreya, I said, my voice cold, my words deliberate. I can't keep pretending like everything is fine when it's not. I'm done. She finally looked up, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. What do you mean? Done with what? Done with this marriage? I said, feeling the words leave my mouth like a weight lifting off my shoulders. Done with you, done with your family. I can't keep living in this toxic environment. I've had enough. Her mouth opened and closed as if she were trying to form words, but no sound came out. I could see the hurt in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for her anymore. I had spent years trying to please her, trying to be the husband she wanted. But it was clear to me now that nothing would ever change. She had chosen her family over me, time and time again. She had chosen to let them drain me dry, both financially and emotionally. She had chosen to remain silent when she should have spoken up. And that was something I couldn't forgive anymore. I never wanted this, Rajiv, she said, her voice trembling. You have to understand. I didn't want things to turn out like this. You didn't want this? I echoed, incredulous. You didn't want this? Then why did you let it happen? Why did you let them walk all over me? Why did you stay silent when your mother and brother demanded more from me? Why didn't you stand up for me? I didn't need to hear an answer. The truth was clear. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. I can't keep fighting for something that isn't there anymore, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. I've given everything I have to this family, to you, and it's never been enough. I can't keep sacrificing myself for people who don't care about me. I can't do it anymore. Shreya stood up suddenly, her eyes filling with tears. Rajiv, please don't do this. I love you. I want us to work. I just don't know how to fix everything. I don't know if we can fix it, I said softly. Not if you're not willing to make the hard choices. Not if you're not willing to stand by me. I am standing by you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But it's hard. It's hard to choose between you and my family. You don't understand. You never will. I understand perfectly, Shreya, I said, my voice cracking. You've chosen them over me, time and time again. And now I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing my peace of mind. I'm choosing my dignity. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. I turned and walked away before she could say anything else, leaving her standing there, in the middle of the room, her tears falling silently. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if I would ever find peace or if I would ever see Shreya the same way again. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living a life that wasn't mine. The next few days passed in a blur of awkward silence between us. We spoke only when necessary, and even then, it felt like the distance between us was growing. I had tried to give her an ultimatum, but it was clear that she wasn't ready to make a decision. She wasn't ready to choose me, and deep down, I knew I had already made my choice. I couldn't keep waiting. I couldn't keep hoping that she would change, that she would suddenly see things from my perspective. I had tried, and I had given everything I had. Now I was at the end of my rope. I needed to make a choice for myself, and that choice was clear. It was time to cut ties. Time to walk away from the people who had taken so much from me. Time to reclaim my life, my future. I didn't know what the next step would be, but I knew it had to be done. And if I had to do it alone, then so be it. The days after I made my decision were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to reconsider, to try one more time, to see if there was any way to salvage this marriage. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep pretending that things would get better on their own. I had given Shreya every chance, every opportunity to choose me, to stand up for me. But she hadn't. She hadn't even tried. And now I had to face the consequences of my own choices. I spent the next few days distancing myself from her. We didn't speak much. When we did, it was strained, awkward. It felt like we were two strangers who happened to live in the same house. I didn't want to make the decision to leave just yet, but every time I looked at her, I saw all the things I had been ignoring for so long. The way her family had undermined me, the way she had let them walk all over me without saying a word. The realization hit me hard. She wasn't going to change. And if she couldn't change, then I had to. One afternoon, I finally gathered the courage to pack my things. It wasn't easy. It was harder than I ever thought it would be. I had spent years building a life with Shreya, a life that now seemed so fragile, so easily shattered. I thought back to the moments we had shared, the hopes we had dreamed of together, and wondered how it had all gone so wrong. I never imagined that this would be my reality, that I would be walking away from everything I thought I had built. I could hear her moving around in the house, but I didn't want to talk to her. Not yet. I needed to do this on my own. I needed to take control of my life, even if it meant breaking my own heart in the process. When I finished packing my things, I stood in the living room, looking around at the life I was leaving behind. The house that had once felt like home now felt like a prison. I could feel the weight of the years pressing down on me, the years I had spent trying to make everyone else happy, trying to please Shreya's family, trying to be the perfect husband. But none of that had mattered. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. I heard the door open behind me and turned to see Shreya standing in the doorway, her eyes wide, her face pale. "Rajiv," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer at first. I couldn't find the words. The pain was too much, the weight of everything we had been through too heavy. "I'm leaving, Shreya," I said finally, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep living like this." She took a step forward, her hands trembling. "No, you don't understand. You can't just leave. We can fix this. We can." "There's nothing left to fix," I interrupted, my voice stronger now. "I've tried, Shreya. I've tried for years, but you haven't. You haven't tried. Your family has drained me dry, and you've let them. You've stood by while they took everything from me, and you've done nothing. I can't keep living like this. I can't keep being your financial backup, your family's ATM. I'm not a machine, Shreya. I'm a person." Her face crumpled as she took a step back. "I never meant for things to get like this. I never wanted to hurt you. You have to know that. I know you didn't want to hurt me," I said, my voice softening for a moment. "But you did. You've hurt me more than you'll ever know. And I don't think you even understand the extent of it. You never stood up for me. You never protected me. And now I have to protect myself." She shook her head, her eyes welling up with tears. "I love you, Rajiv. I do. I just didn't know what to do. My family, they've always been like this. I didn't want to choose between you and them. I couldn't." I looked at her, feeling a mixture of anger and sorrow. "You didn't want to choose, but you did. Every time. And now I'm choosing for both of us. I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing peace. I can't keep giving myself away to people who don't care about me. I can't keep sacrificing everything for a family that only sees me as a source of money." She stepped closer to me, reaching out, but I took a step back, feeling the distance between us growing. "Please don't do this," she said, her voice breaking. "I'll change. I'll do better. I'll tell my mom to stop asking you for money. It's not just about the money, Shreya," I said, cutting her off. "It's about respect. It's about standing by me, not letting your family walk all over me. I've asked you time and time again to take my side, and you didn't. You never did." The tears were falling freely now, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. I had spent too long trying to make her understand, trying to make her see what was wrong, but nothing ever changed. Nothing would ever change. And the longer I stayed, the more I was losing myself. "I can't fix this anymore, Shreya," I said, my voice firm, resolute. "I'm done." I turned to leave, not looking back, not allowing myself to be swayed by her pleas. I knew she wouldn't understand. I knew she wouldn't want to let me go. But this was my choice. This was what I needed. I had given her everything I had, and now it was time to take back what was mine. As I walked out the door, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't the relief I had hoped for, but it was something that told me I had made the right choice. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew there would be days when I would question myself, when I would wonder if I had made a mistake. But I couldn't keep living in the shadows of other people's expectations. And if that meant walking away from everything I thought I knew, then so be it. I couldn't keep sacrificing my happiness, my peace, for people who didn't respect me. And I couldn't keep letting my marriage be defined by the expectations of others. It was time to take control of my own life. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally free. The first few days after leaving Shreya felt like a whirlwind. My mind was constantly racing, yet at the same time I felt numb, as if the weight of everything I had endured was too much for my body to process all at once. Leaving had been the right decision. I knew that deep down, but it didn't make the pain of severing everything we had built together any easier. I had left my home, my life, my security, all in pursuit of something that felt like peace. But peace, it seemed, was still out of reach. I moved into a small apartment downtown, a place that was far from the luxury I was used to. But for once, I didn't mind. I needed space. I needed to breathe without feeling the suffocating expectations that had defined my life for so long. The apartment was basic, no frills, no excessive luxury. Just a place where I could rest my head without hearing the constant buzzing of demands and complaints. The silence was overwhelming at first, but it was also strangely comforting. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. I was doing what I wanted, when I wanted, without anyone telling me how I should be. No one was there to criticize my every move, to ask for more, to demand that I give up a piece of myself for their benefit. Felt like freedom, though it was a freedom laced with loneliness. I wasn't used to being alone, to facing the quiet on my own terms. The emptiness of the apartment was a reflection of the emptiness I had felt in my marriage for so long. I thought about Shreya constantly, wondering if she was okay, if she was regretting what had happened. I had expected anger, bitterness, maybe even a sense of relief from her. But what I hadn't expected was how her absence seemed to haunt me, how the guilt gnawed at me, even though I knew I had done the right thing. I kept replaying the last conversation we had, her tear-streaked face, her desperate pleas for me to stay, to try again. I had wanted to stay, I had wanted to try again, but I couldn't. I had nothing left to give. The emotional toll had been too great, and I had finally reached my breaking point. Despite everything, I still found myself thinking about her family. They hadn't been just an annoying presence in our marriage. They had been a constant force of manipulation and control. I had never truly been part of their world, not in the way they wanted me to be. I had always been the outsider, the one who was expected to play by their rules, to foot the bills, to bear the weight of their demands without question. I had tried, for years, to fit into that mold, to make them see me as a worthy member of their family. But now I saw it all for what it was, a game where I was always the pawn. It was hard to let go of the anger, though, hard to let go of the years of resentment that had built up inside me. For so long, I had been so focused on doing the right thing, on being the good husband, the good son-in-law, that I had allowed them to walk all over me. I had allowed myself to be used, but no more. I knew I couldn't keep living in this cycle of bitterness and resentment. I had to find a way to move on, to let go of the past and focus on my future. It wasn't going to be easy, but I couldn't keep letting my past dictate my future. I had made the decision to leave, and now I had to live with it. I had to make a life for myself on my own terms, without the constant shadow of Shreya's family looming over me. I spent the next few weeks working on rebuilding myself. I started going to the gym again, something I hadn't done in years. The physical exhaustion helped clear my mind, gave me something else to focus on other than the ache in my chest, the lingering sense of loss. I even started picking up old hobbies, the ones I had abandoned long ago in the name of family obligations. I started reading again, diving into books I hadn't had the time to enjoy. It was small, incremental progress, but it was progress nonetheless. One day, a few weeks after moving out, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, wondering who it could be. Part of me thought it might be Shreya, but another part of me didn't want to hear her voice, not yet. I had made my decision, and I didn't want to go back on it. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Rajiv, it's Pratima," came the voice on the other end. My stomach sank. It had only been a matter of time before they reached out to me. I had expected it, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. "Pratima," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you want?" "I need to talk to you," she said, her tone almost pleading. "It's about Shreya. She's been a mess ever since you left." You can't just walk away from your marriage like this. You need to fix things. You need to come home." I was silent for a moment, feeling the anger and frustration bubbling up again. I already told her, "Pratima, I'm done. I can't keep doing this. I've given everything, and it's never enough. I can't keep letting her family use me. I can't keep sacrificing myself for people who don't care about me." "You don't understand," Pratima snapped. "You think this is all about money, but it's not. It's about family. You're throwing everything away for nothing." "Maybe it's not about money," I replied, my voice getting sharper. "But money was a big part of it, and you don't get to tell me what's important in my life anymore. I've made my decision. I'm moving on." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought she might hang up. But then she spoke again, her voice softer this time. "Rajiv, I know you're hurt. I know you think we've taken advantage of you. But Shreya loves you. She doesn't want to lose you. We don't want to lose you." I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself. "It's too late, Pratima. I've made my choice, and I'm not going back." The line went quiet, and I felt a pang of guilt. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe there was still a chance to fix things with Shreya. But I knew, deep down, that I couldn't go back to that life. I couldn't keep living in a cycle of giving and getting nothing in return. Not anymore. "I'll talk to her," I said finally, my voice low. "But I'm not coming back." The conversation ended with that. And as I sat there, staring at the phone, I knew that this was just the beginning. I had made my choice, but the consequences were far from over. The following days after that phone call were a blur of uncertainty. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me had hoped that Shreya would come to her senses, that her family would stop pressuring me, that I would wake up one day and feel like I had made the wrong decision, like I should go back. But that didn't happen. Every time I thought about going back, about trying again, the anger resurfaced, the frustration, the exhaustion, and in my heart, I knew I could never go back to that life. It was too late. I spent my time focusing on myself, continuing the routine of the gym and reading. I got a small sense of satisfaction from taking control over my life, but it was always tinged with the question of whether I had done the right thing. Could I really walk away from a marriage of 8 years? A marriage that had once held so much promise? I hadn't wanted things to end this way, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Shreya's family had changed everything. She had let them tear us apart, little by little. The pressure from her mother, her father, her brother, all of it had become unbearable. And Shreya had either been too afraid to stand up for me or had just stopped caring. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing something important. The emptiness in my chest was growing, like a hollow pit that nothing could fill. I wasn't just losing Shreya. I was losing the person I had been. The man who had believed in the promises of marriage, in the idea that love could withstand anything. The man who had tried so hard to make it work, to please everyone, to be the perfect husband, the perfect son-in-law. But now I was nothing more than a man with broken dreams. Then, one evening, as I sat in my apartment, trying to distract myself with a book I had been meaning to read for weeks, my phone rang again. The number was unfamiliar, but there was something about it that made my heart race. I picked up the phone without hesitation. "Hello," I said, my voice tight. "Rajiv," came a voice that I immediately recognized. It was Shreya's. "Please, can we talk?" My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected her to reach out again. The last time we spoke, it had been a final conversation, a goodbye. I wasn't sure I was ready to reopen that chapter, but something in her voice, something in the way she said my name, made me want to hear her out. "Shreya," I replied, my voice quiet. "What is it? Why are you calling?" "I'm sorry, Rajiv," she said, her voice full of desperation. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. I never wanted things to go this far. I never wanted to lose you. Please, can we meet? Can we talk face to face?" I closed my eyes and let out a long, slow breath. This was exactly what I had feared. She was trying to pull me back in, trying to convince me that everything could be fixed, that we could start over. But could we really? Could I forget everything that had led to this moment? "I don't think it's a good idea, Shreya," I said. my voice shaking slightly. I've made my decision. I've left. I can't go back. Please, Rajiv, she begged. I don't know what else to do. I've been miserable without you. And my family, they're making it worse. They're telling me I should have done more, that I should have stopped everything from falling apart. But I didn't. And now I'm losing you. I can't lose you. There it was again. The guilt. The sense that maybe, just maybe, I was making a mistake. But it was too late for second thoughts. Too late for hope. I had already walked away, already made up my mind. I couldn't go back to the person I was before, the person who let himself be controlled, used, belittled. I wasn't that man anymore. I can't fix this, Shreya, I said, my voice firm now. I've tried. I've given everything, and it's never enough. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. You need to understand that. I do understand, she said, her voice cracking. I understand that I was wrong. I understand that I let you down. But I don't want to lose you. Please don't make this final. I felt a surge of anger rise within me, and I struggled to keep my emotions in check. You don't get it, Shreya. It's not just about you. It's about me. About what I need. I can't keep sacrificing myself for your family. I spent years doing that, and I've had nothing left for myself. I'm not going to live like that anymore. She was silent for a moment, and I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. It made my heart ache, but I couldn't let that emotion guide me. Not anymore. I had made my choice. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I know you are, I said, my voice softening. But sorry isn't enough anymore. You had the chance to stand by me to make things right, but you didn't. And now I have to do what's right for me. There was a long pause, and I could feel the finality of our conversation settling in. I wasn't sure if Shreya understood, if she really knew what I was saying. But in that moment, I knew I couldn't give her another chance. I couldn't go back to the life I had left behind. I'm going to hang up now, I said quietly, trying to keep the emotion from creeping into my voice. Goodbye, Shreya. Goodbye, she whispered back, and the line went dead. I sat there in the silence, feeling the weight of the decision settle on my shoulders. It wasn't easy. It would never be easy, but it was the right choice. I had to let go. I had to move on. In the days that followed, I found myself drifting. I went to work. I kept up with my routine, but something was missing. I had lost a part of myself in that marriage, a part that I wasn't sure I would ever get back. I knew I couldn't keep living in the past, but I wasn't sure where to go from here. The future seemed uncertain, and I felt a deep sense of emptiness that I couldn't shake. I spent hours thinking about what my life would look like now. What would I do without Shreya, without her family, without the life I had known? The possibilities were endless, but the thought of starting over, of rebuilding everything from scratch, was both terrifying and exhilarating. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. I was never going back. The person I was before was gone, and now I had to figure out who I was meant to be. The weeks following my final conversation with Shreya felt like both a lifetime and a moment in time, all at once. I had made the decision to move forward, to leave behind everything that had once felt like a life I could never walk away from. But now, without that weight hanging over me, I wasn't sure what to do with myself. Every day felt like a reminder of everything I had given up. The family dinners, the gatherings, the holidays. Every little thing that once defined me now felt distant, almost like a dream. And as much as I tried to move on, the ache in my chest would come back, gnawing at me during quiet moments. I threw myself deeper into my work, burying my frustrations and confusion in tasks that demanded my attention. The days flew by, and my apartment became a place of refuge, a small sanctuary where I could be alone with my thoughts and nothing else. I didn't talk to anyone about what I was going through. Not my friends, not colleagues. Just stayed closed off in my little world, a world of uncertainty. But there was one thing that haunted me the most, something I couldn't ignore. It was the voice of her family. Even though I had walked away from Shreya, her family hadn't let go. The phone calls had stopped for a while after that final conversation with Pratima, but the silence was oppressive. It was as if they were waiting for me to come back, to bend to their will, to take everything they had given me and offer it back in return. They had never understood that I wasn't their ATM, their savior, or their problem solver. Then, one evening, I received an unexpected email. It was from her brother, Arun. My heart clenched when I saw his name in my inbox. I had no idea what he could possibly want, but part of me knew that this wasn't the end. If it wasn't Shreya, it would be someone else from her family. I opened the email, feeling the familiar pang of dread settle in. Rajiv, I don't know where to start. I know things have been difficult, and I know that we haven't always treated you the way you deserved. But you need to understand something. Shreya is not okay. She's barely eating, she's barely sleeping. She keeps telling me that she made a huge mistake and that she wants you back. She doesn't know how to fix things, and neither do I. But I'm asking you, as a man who has been a part of our family for so long, to consider this. Please think about what you're doing to her. We are not perfect, but we need you. You have always been there for us, and now we're asking you to be there for her. Don't leave her expected. I hadn't wanted to think about Shreya this way, as someone broken and lost. But that's exactly how I had left her, without a second thought, without turning back. Part of me felt guilty, but another part, the stronger part, felt vindicated. She had left me with nothing, so why should I sacrifice myself for her again? Why should I go back to a life that had left me feeling drained, isolated, and unappreciated? But Arun's words stuck with me, gnawing at my conscience. I had seen Shreya in pain, but I had never seen her like this. I had never seen her as vulnerable, as someone who truly needed me. It made me question whether I had been too hasty, whether I had made the wrong call by walking away so decisively. Still, I knew that I couldn't go back to that place. I couldn't be the person who simply accepted their wrongdoings without standing up for myself. I couldn't erase the past, no matter how hard I tried. The next few days were filled with confusion. I couldn't stop thinking about the email, about the state Shreya was in. But I also knew I couldn't fix her. Couldn't fix what had been broken between us. I wasn't the person who could be that savior anymore. I had already given so much of myself to her family, and in the end, it hadn't been enough. So I did what I thought I needed to do. I replied to Arun, telling him that I couldn't help, that I had made my decision, and it was final. I told him I couldn't go back to that life, that I couldn't help Shreya anymore. It was a harsh message, and I knew it would hurt, but I couldn't be the man who let himself be used anymore. I had given enough. The reply came a few hours later, and when I read it, I almost wished I hadn't. Arun wasn't angry. He wasn't furious or bitter. He was disappointed. He didn't blame me for leaving Shreya, but he did say that I was making a mistake. That one day, I would look back and regret my decision. He told me I didn't know how much I was hurting Shreya, and that if I truly cared about her, I would put my pride aside and make things right. It was a simple message, but the impact it had on me was deep. Regret. The one thing I feared more than anything else. What if I was making the wrong choice? What if, years from now, I would look back and wonder if I could have done more? What if I was abandoning something that could have been fixed, something that could have been salvaged? That night, I couldn't sleep. The questions circled in my head like vultures, picking at the edges of my mind. Could I have tried harder? Could I have fought for us more? Was walking away really the only way to heal? The morning came, and I woke up with a headache, the weight of the last few days heavy on my shoulders. I knew I couldn't keep going back and forth, torn between what I thought was right and what my heart was telling me. The confusion was eating away at me. Then, as if to answer all the questions swirling in my head, I received another call. This time it wasn't from Arun, nor was it from Shreya. It was from Pratima, and her voice, when I picked up, was strained, panicked. "Rajiv, I need to talk to you," she said. "Shreya is in the hospital. She's been having a breakdown. I don't know what to do. Please come. Please, just come and talk to her." I froze. A hospital? I felt a cold wave of fear wash over me. What had happened? Had it really come to this? I stood there for what felt like an eternity. The phone still pressed against my ear as Pratima's frantic words echoed in my head. "She's in the hospital, Rajiv. Please, you need to come." I didn't know what to feel. Was this just another attempt to guilt me into returning to a life that had already broken me? Or was it truly something that needed my attention? I had seen Shreya suffer in silence before, hiding her pain behind a smile, trying to keep everything together while the pressure from her family weighed on her. But this was different. This wasn't just the usual strain. The urgency in Pratima's voice was undeniable. I had to make a choice. I quickly grabbed my coat, not really thinking about what I was doing, only knowing that I couldn't ignore this. I had walked away from Shreya once, and now it seemed that fate was giving me one final chance to make things right. Or maybe it wasn't fate. Maybe it was just the consequences of everything that had happened. Either way, I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but I knew I had to go. The drive to the hospital felt like a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind racing with questions I didn't have answers to. What had happened to Shreya? Was she really in that bad of a state? I tried to push aside the guilt that was creeping in, tried to convince myself that I had made the right choice by walking away. But as I got closer to the hospital, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what I was about to face. When I arrived, Pratima was waiting for me outside the emergency room. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She barely looked at me as I approached, her gaze fixed on the ground. "Rajiv," she said softly, her voice breaking. "She's been asking for you. She won't talk to anyone else. Please, I know things haven't been good between you two, but she needs you." I nodded silently, feeling a knot form in my stomach. I wasn't sure what I could do, or if I even had the right to be there. But something told me that I couldn't just walk away this time. Pratima led me down the corridor, her steps hurried and anxious. We stopped outside a room, and she opened the door slowly. Shreya was lying in a hospital bed, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide and vacant. She didn't look like the woman I had known. She looked fragile, broken, and lost in a way that I had never seen before. She turned her head slowly as we entered, her eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence between us was thick, heavy, and I couldn't find the words to bridge the distance that had grown between us. The woman who had once been my everything was now a stranger to me, someone I didn't know how to reach. "Rajiv," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm so sorry for everything." I felt a rush of emotion hit me then. Anger, sadness, regret, all mixed together in a way I couldn't untangle. She had always been sorry, always claimed she was sorry, but it had never been enough. Not when her family had torn us apart. Not when I had been pushed aside for their convenience. I took a step closer, my heart pounding. "What happened, Shreya? What are you doing here?" She closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering the strength to speak. When she opened them again, I saw the raw vulnerability in her gaze. I don't know how to fix things," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know what went wrong, but I can't live like this anymore. I can't live with the guilt, with the lies, with everything I let happen. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could make everyone happy, but I couldn't. And now I've lost you. I've lost everything." My chest tightened at her words. I had heard this before. I had heard her express remorse, but it had never felt genuine. Now, standing in front of her, I wasn't sure if this was just another act or if she was finally being honest. But one thing was clear. I wasn't the same person I had been when we first met. I wasn't the man who would blindly accept her apologies and return to the way things had been. "You can't keep blaming yourself, Shreya," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You're not the only one who messed up. It wasn't just you. It was your family too." Slowly, they never tears falling freely now. "But I didn't help you, Rajiv. I let them control me. I let them push you out of our lives, and I was too scared to do anything about it. I thought I could fix it, that everything would get better. But now you're gone, and I'm here, alone." The sadness in her voice hit me like a physical blow. I had wanted her to feel the consequences of her actions, but seeing her like this, broken and desperate, made me question everything. Had I been too harsh? Had I given up on her too easily? "I'm sorry too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry I couldn't fix this. But I can't go back, Shreya. I can't go back to a life that wasn't good for either of us. I have to move forward. And so do you. She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who had always believed in us, who had wanted to make everything work. But that version of her was lost now, buried under the weight of the years we had spent fighting, compromising, and losing ourselves in the process. I understand, she said quietly, her voice filled with a quiet acceptance. I know you're right. I can't change what's happened, and I can't expect you to fix me. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry, that I never meant for any of this to happen. I nodded, feeling the finality of the moment. There was no more we could say to fix what had been broken. There was no more hope that things could go back to the way they were. Our time had passed. I have to go, I said, my voice steady now. I can't be what you need me to be, but I hope you find what you need, Shreya. I really do. She didn't say anything else as I turned and walked out of the room, the sound of her soft sobs following me down the hallway. When I reached the exit, I stopped for a moment, taking a deep breath. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing. I had done what I needed to do. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fair, but it was the only way forward.